Okay, let's talk about the dirtiest, best kept secret in American real estate. When you hear the words mobile home park, what's the first thing that pops into your head? You're probably picturing rusted out single wides, torn screen doors, a rusty Camaro up on cinder blocks, and a scene straight out of Cops. It's the ultimate punchline of the American dream. The stigma is woven deeply into the culture. But while the middle class is busy mocking trailer parks, Wall Street billionaires, mega private equity firms, and aggressive real estate syndicators are quietly buying up every single one of them they can get their hands on. Because here is the brutal reality. That stigmatized, rundown dirt lot on the edge of town is arguably the most lucrative, recession-proof, high-yield asset class in the entire country. Let me put this in perspective. If you drop $30 million on a shiny new luxury apartment complex in downtown Austin or Miami, you are fighting tooth and nail just to squeeze out a 4% or 5% return. You are competing with new construction down the street, offering 2 months of free rent and a Peloton in the gym just to keep your occupancy up. But if you buy a dirt lot with 100 aging manufactured homes in the Ohio Rust Belt or rural Texas, you can routinely pull down 10% to 15% cash-on-cash returns. Why? Because of one ruthless economic truth that separates this from every other type of real estate. You aren't renting these people a house. You are renting them the dirt underneath it. That's the hook. Now, let's back up and look at how we even got here, because the history of this industry explains why it's such a monopoly today. Before 1976, trailer parks were exactly that. They were places for travel trailers. Thin metal boxes with no insulation that you could hitch to a Ford and pull across the country. But in 1976, the federal government stepped in and passed the HUD code. This set strict national standards for how these things had to be built, mandating fire safety, plumbing, insulation, and structural framing. Overnight, the industry transformed. They stopped building trailers and started building manufactured housing. These were real homes, built in climate-controlled factories, and shipped on massive flatbed trucks to their final destination. And once they arrived, they were never meant to move again. But the stigma? The stigma never left. And that stigma is exactly what created the modern billionaire's playground. Let's break down the mechanics of the moat. The first thing you need to play this game is a park. And here is where you hit the ultimate competitive barrier. You cannot just buy a 40-acre cornfield outside of Dallas, pave some roads, and open a new mobile home park. It is essentially illegal in modern America. Why? Because of local zoning laws and NIMBYs not in my backyard. City councils universally despise mobile home parks. To a local politician, a trailer park is a fiscal nightmare. They bring in lower-income demographics with families who utilize the public school system, the police force, and local infrastructure, but the park itself doesn't generate nearly enough property tax revenue to cover those municipal costs. Because of this, zoning boards have universally slammed the door shut. You cannot build new ones. In fact, the total supply of mobile home parks in the United States is actively shrinking every single year. Developers are constantly buying them up, bulldozing the homes, and replacing them with Amazon fulfillment centers, strip malls, or luxury mixed-use condos. Think about the macroeconomics here. In 2026, the median American home costs over $420,000. Interest rates have locked millions of working-class people out of homeownership forever. The demand for affordable housing is exploding at historic, crisis-level rates, while the supply of mobile home parks is artificially capped and actively shrinking. In economics, when demand goes exponential and supply is legally forbidden from expanding, whoever holds the existing assets holds a total monopoly. But buying your way into this monopoly isn't cheap. The days of buying a mom-and-pop park for pocket change are dead. A decent 100 pad park in a secondary market is going to run you anywhere from $4 million to $8 million. And unless you're paying straight cash, you need commercial debt. Banks usually demand 25% to 30% down. That means you need $1.5 million to $2 million liquid just to sit at the adult table. Now, let's talk about the product itself and the darkest secret of the industry, the financing. The term mobile home is the greatest marketing lie ever told. There is absolutely nothing mobile about them. Once a manufactured home leaves the factory, gets dropped onto a concrete pad, strapped down to the earth, and skirted it stays there, forever. To physically unhook a single wide home, jack it up, slide axles under it, hire a massive semi-truck with pilot cars, transport it on the highway, and set it up in a new park cost between $7,000 and $12,000. Here is where the brutal leverage of this business model kicks in. The average tenant living in a mobile home park does not have $10,000 sitting in a savings account to move their house. They simply don't. This creates what Wall Street sociopaths call tenant stickiness. In a normal apartment building, tenant turnover is around 45% to 50% a year. In a mobile home park, turnover is essentially zero. Less than 2% of mobile homes are ever moved from their original resting place. This gives the park owner an uncomfortable, almost terrifying amount of pricing power. If you own an apartment complex and you raise the rent by $200, your tenant will pack their boxes, hand you the keys, and move to a cheaper building down the street. If you own the dirt under their mobile home and you raise the lot rent by $200, they cannot leave. They are financially trapped. If they can't afford the new rent, they eventually get evicted from the dirt. But they can't take the house with them. So, the park owner legally seizes the home through an abandoned property process, slaps a fresh coat of paint on it, and sells or rents it to the next desperate person. It is an incredibly harsh reality. But wait, it gets darker. Let's talk about how the people living in these homes actually buy them, because this is where the real money is made. You might be surprised to learn who the undisputed king of the trailer park is. It's not some slumlord, it's Warren Buffett. Berkshire Hathaway owns Clayton Homes, the largest manufacturer of mobile homes in America. But building the homes isn't the genius part. The genius part is that Berkshire Hathaway also owns Vanderbilt Mortgage and 21st Mortgage Corporation, the largest lenders in the space. When you buy a traditional single-family home, you get a mortgage. A mortgage is heavily regulated by the federal government, comes with consumer protections, and usually carries a relatively low interest rate because the loan is tied to real estate. But when you buy a mobile home in a park, you do not own the land beneath it. Therefore, legally, the home is not considered real estate. It is considered personal property, just like a car, a boat, or a tractor. Because of this, you don't get a mortgage. You get what is called a chattel loan. Chattel loans are vicious. They are subject to far fewer federal regulations. The interest rates are often double or triple what a traditional mortgage would cost. In a market where a traditional mortgage sits at 6.5%, a chattel loan for a mobile home might carry a 12% to 15% interest rate. So, low-income buyers are forced to take out high-interest personal property loans on a depreciating asset, sitting on land they don't own, where the landlord can raise the lot rent to infinity. If they default, the lender repossesses the home just like they would repossess a Honda Civic. It is a perfectly engineered extraction machine. So how do the big private equity players actually run these parks? There are two distinct business models. The first is POH park-owned homes. You own the dirt, and you own the metal boxes sitting on it. You rent them out like apartments. This is a nightmare. Mobile homes depreciate. When a tenant punches a hole in the drywall, the roof leaks, or the toilet backs up, your phone rings. Your maintenance costs will eat you alive. The holy grail of the industry is TOH tenant-owned homes. In this model, you only own the dirt, the asphalt roads, and the underground pipes. The tenant holds the title to their own physical home. If their roof leaks, that's their problem. If their water heater blows up, they call a plumber, not you. Your only job is making sure the streetlights work and the potholes are filled. The margin difference is staggering. A standard apartment building's operating expenses, the OPEX will consume about 45% to 50% of your gross revenue. In a pure tenant-owned mobile home park, your OPEX can drop to 25%, sometimes even 15%. It is a hyper-lean, cash-flowing machine. But before you think it's completely passive, we have to talk about the infrastructure trap. When you buy a mobile home park, you are essentially buying a private municipal utility company. If your park operates on city water and city sewer, congratulations, you hit the jackpot. But a massive percentage of these parks operate on private well water and private septic systems, or worse, a massive aging wastewater treatment lagoon. If those clay pipes from 1,975 collapse, or that lagoon fails EPA compliance, the federal government doesn't care if you're a small-time investor. They will force you to fix it. Ripping out and replacing a failing private sewer system can easily cost $700,000 to over $1 million. One bad pipe can vaporize a decade of your profits before you've collected a single rent check. Assuming your pipes don't explode, here is the real Wall Street playbook. Here is how private equity firms take a $5 million park and turn it into $8 million in 18 months, without building a single new thing. It all comes down to utility billbacks and cap rates. In the 1980s, when sweet old mom and pop ran the park, They usually charged a flat $300 a month for lot rent, and they included the water, sewer, and trash in that price. Corporate buyers do not do this. The very first thing a private equity firm does when they buy a park is bring in contractors to install submeters on every single home. They unbundle the utilities and implement a RUBS system, ratio utility billing. Suddenly, the tenant is paying for their own water and trash on top of their rent. Let's do the math on why this is so insanely profitable. Commercial real estate is valued by a strict mathematical formula. Net operating income, NO, divided by the cap rate equals the property value. If you buy a 100 lot park, submeter the water, saving you $40,000 a year, and raise the lot rent by $60 per pad, making you an extra $72,000 a year, you have just increased your total NOI by $112,000. In a market with a 6% cap rate, that $112,000 increase in profit doesn't just mean more cash in your pocket. It forces the valuation of the entire property up by almost $1.9 million. Read that again. You didn't build a clubhouse. You didn't pave new roads. You didn't make the community better. You just shifted the utility bills to the trapped tenants, changed the numbers on an Excel spreadsheet, and created $1.9 million out of thin air. You then go to the bank, do a cash-out refinance, pull your original down payment completely out of the deal tax-free, and go buy another park. This is the exact playbook used by titans like Sam Zell's Equity Lifestyle Properties. It sounds foolproof, right? That's what everyone thought. Which leads us to the great syndicator crash of 2026. Between 2018 and 2022, every 5-year-old with a microphone and a real estate podcast decided they were going to be a mobile home park mogul. They formed syndications, pooling money from retail investors to buy up parks across the country. But because everyone was competing for a shrinking supply of parks, prices skyrocketed. These syndicators were overpaying wildly, buying parks at 3% or 4% cap rates, assuming they could just jack up the rents forever to make the math work. To fund these bloated purchases, they used bridge debt. These are short-term commercial loans, usually 3 to 5 years, with floating interest rates. Back in 2021, that debt cost them 3.5%. But then the Federal Reserve stepped in to crush inflation. Interest rates spiked. Now, in 2026, those short-term loans have hit their maturity wall. The debt has come due. But the floating interest rates are now sitting at 7.5% or 8%. The cash flow from the park doesn't even cover the monthly interest payments anymore. The property values have dropped because cap rates expanded, meaning these syndicators can't refinance. And they can't sell without taking a massive loss. Right now, billions of dollars of over-leveraged mobile home parks are quietly being foreclosed on and handed back to the banks. The gurus got slaughtered by the math they thought they mastered. And for the ones who survived the debt wall, there is an even bigger threat looming. The pushback is getting violent. The risk in this asset class no longer comes from the free market. It comes from the government and the residents themselves. The optics of corporate suits squeezing fixed-income seniors and blue-collar workers out of their homes is political poison. Blue states like New York, Colorado, and Oregon are aggressively cracking down. They are passing strict rent control laws, specifically targeting mobile home parks, legally capping lot rent increases to the rate of inflation. But the biggest disruptor is the rise of ROC's resident-owned communities. Some states have passed right of first refusal laws. This means if a park owner wants to sell to a private equity firm, they legally have to give the residents 60 to 90 days to pool their money, secure state-backed financing, and buy the park themselves. Once a park becomes a cooperative owned by the residents, the profit motive is stripped away. The rent only goes up when the actual costs of running the park go up. It's a direct, legislative dagger to the heart of the Wall Street playbook. If rent control freezes your ability to raise lot rents, the entire value-add formula collapses overnight. Your net operating income flatlines, meaning your property value flatlines. You are stuck holding an aging piece of infrastructure with zero upside. So, let's run the final verdict. The optimistic case. You buy a mismanaged mom-and-pop park with city utilities using long-term fixed-rate debt. You convert everything to tenant-owned homes. You submeter the utilities, bump the lot rents gently to market value, and maintain the roads. Your tenants stay, your overhead drops to 20%, and you sit on a cash-printing monopoly in a market where new competition literally cannot be built. The realistic case. You skip the deep environmental inspection to save a few bucks. 6 months later, your private sewer lagoon backs up into the streets. The EPA threatens to shut down the entire property. You're forced to take out a high-interest $800,000 bridge loan just to fix the pipes. Meanwhile, the city council passes a rent control ordinance, trapping your revenue while your insurance premiums skyrocket 30%. Your margin is vaporized, and you are left holding a toxic, unsellable liability. If you want to play in the mobile home park space, you need to understand what you are actually buying. You are not buying houses. You are buying a highly regulated, politically volatile infrastructure business attached to a captive customer base. The real asset was never the aluminum box. It was the monopoly on the dirt underneath it.